Monza is a track in F124 that is all about two things: straight line speed and slow speed traction. Well, that isn't quite true. The Italian track is one of the easier tracks to drive, however there are a fair few intricacies that you need to consider when creating a car setup. You do obviously need to look at your top speed due to those long straights, but you also need to be careful of too much understeer through the faster corners, and energy recovery can also be a big problem due to the lack of consistent braking zones, and you will almost certainly suffer from uneven tyre wear. With all of those elements to weigh up, I'm going to now show you our recommended Monza car setup for F124. The aero setup is the lowest that I've run at any track so far. I've gone with a front wing angle of 9 and rear wing that is right down at 0. This will eliminate as much drag as possible from the rear wing, while giving the front of the car enough downforce to reduce understeer. This setup approach will ensure that you're competitive down the straights, giving you the best opportunity to overtake and defend successfully. Now the transmission setup may look a little bit odd. Traction out of turn 2 and 5 are very important to give you a good run down the straights that follow, as well as ensuring you don't wear your rear tyres too fast due to wheel spin, and this is why I recommend setting the on-throttle differential down at just 20. During my testing through a full race distance, I did start with this set higher, but ultimately ended on 20% as a comfortable setup by the end of the race. The off-throttle differential is higher than many of our car setups so far, and that is mainly because I've set the engine braking to 100%. Setting the engine braking high does limit how low we can set the off-throttle diff, so I've gone with 60% on the off-throttle diff this time round. Now ERS recovery is a big issue at Monza, so setting the engine braking to 100% gives us the best chance of recovering as much energy per lap as possible. This high setup will help decelerate our car faster as well during those heavy braking zones. For the geometry, I've set the camber far left as per normal. Tyre wear isn't too much of an issue at Monza other than rear wear from wheel spin, so we can get away with this setup approach nice and easily. Then I've set the front toe out to 0.03 and rear toe in to 0.07. The front toe will add a touch more responsiveness at the front of the car, giving us a better initial turn-in. Understeer can be a problem at Monza, so this goes a little bit towards fixing that. The rear toe set to 0.07 will help keep the rear of the car stable. There are a couple of corners where the rear can get a little bit lively. Out of turns 6 and 7, the two Lesmos, the rear can step out under acceleration, so the little bit of rear toe should help calm things down a little. Now the suspension setup is pretty stiff, with a setup of 41 at the front and just 5 at the rear. This will help reduce understeer and allows us to run a low ride height. The anti-roll bars are set to 16 and 9, which is a pretty big difference from front to back, and this will just promote rear stability, much like the rear toe does. Then the ride height is set to 25 and 55, which is about as low as you'd want to go around Italy. You can hit some curbs, and the exit curbs at some corners are high enough to cause a bit of instability if you go too low. The brake setup for Monza is pretty much set in stone before you even set foot out of the garage. You've got to go with 100% brake pressure to slow your car as quick as possible, and 56% brake bias. This forward bias will help slow the car faster than a more rearward setup would, and the higher engine braking of 100% back in the transmission setup requires a more forward bias to avoid any rotation under braking. Tyre wear will be uneven at Monza simply due to the imbalance between left and right corners. The right side of the car will wear much slower than the left, so our tyre pressure setup targets those right tyres with lower pressures to help them stay hotter. Go 24.5 and 25.5 for the front tyres, and 25.5 and 26.5 for the rears. Overheating shouldn't really be too much of an issue, as the long straights really help cool your tyres between corners. And that will round out our Monza car setup. This isn't one of the most entertaining tracks to drive, but the faster corners do provide some technical challenge for both your driving skill and car setup. Using this setup approach will ensure that you're very competitive down the straights and the car isn't too much of a handful through the corners. As always, if you're liking these setups, please hit that like button and leave a comment, as the YouTube algorithm really likes that, and consider subscribing and hitting that alert bell if you do want to be notified when new videos drop. But for now guys, I will see you all on track.